Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm so glad to be here. We're going to do another interview of subject matter experts to share information that can help you in your business and your profession. My name is Cyndy McDonald. I'm an instructor for the UCLA College Counseling Certificate Program. And today I'm very pleased and honored to have with me my guest and friend, Jennie Kent.
Hello, everyone.
And Jennie is an educational consultant. Her company is Big J Educational Consulting, and she is the most experienced international counselor that I know. So welcome,
Well,
Jennie.
that's very kind of you. Thank you. I didn't know that.
Oh yes, your experience and your knowledge, and just the variety of students that you work with has given you such a breadth of experience. So tell us a little about that experience. How did you come to be an international educational consultant, Jennie?
Okay. Well, it's funny. Somebody just asked me this the other day. I actually started educational consulting because when I was 14, I went to an educational consultant, and I'm convinced that he saved my life. It was such a huge impact that he made. And I then, went to boarding school and went to college and got married right out of college and moved abroad, and, kept kind of hearing stories of families who, maybe had been led astray or who just didn't have enough information. And I said to my husband at the time, why didn't they go to a consultant? And he said, well, we don't have that here. I was living in Colombia, and I thought that's a great thing because I, at the time, had fallen into a teaching job, which I loved. I was getting my master's in education, and I kept saying to all of my instructors, when I finish my master's, I'm going to be an educational consultant. I think for international students, there are many schools that don't have counselors. They're small schools. They have maybe a student or two per year that apply abroad. They can't really justify in their budget. And that's kind of how I got started. And I just, I try not to say no to anyone who needs my help. And that's why I have such a breadth, because students get in touch with me from all over the world, and I'm always happy to learn about a new educational system, look at different transcripts, learn about different styles of education.
So how do they find out about you then? If they're reaching out to you from all over the world, how do they learn about your services?
That's a really good question. Interestingly enough, I have a lot of US students from the Bay Area for the UK. So going the opposite direction. Mm-hmm. And all the families have told me that it's been school counselors who've recommended me. I think part of the reason why people know my name is because very early on, I decided to tackle the issue of financial aid for international students and kind of access and affordability. I found it overly mysterious and it frustrated me, and I decided I was going to get to the bottom of it. So my partner, Jeff Levy, and I produce a financial aid chart for international students, as well as one for domestic. But and I think a lot of students just find my name through that. There are school counselors definitely in Latin America who recommend me, because sometimes what a family will do is, if there isn't a school counselor, they'll call the local American school and say, can you recommend somebody? So it's definitely word of mouth. I'm really big on these like 3 pots that I feel like you have to constantly be working at. And I call them like my 3 C's, right? It's your clients, your colleagues, and the colleges. Mm-hmm. And I always want to be, anything that I'm doing in regards to professional development, I want to be hitting as many of those pots as possible. I do a lot of professional development. I love it. I just love to go and tour colleges and learn about different schools. You never know who's going to come through your door. Right. So you need to know a lot.
That is true. Well, you and I have that in common about wanting to do professional development. Yeah. That's definitely something that I've always been involved in too.
Well, so, I remember when I started, I called you and you were so helpful to me over the telephone. So
well, I enjoy it. It's always been a pleasure. And, and now that to see people grow and see that exchange now, it's so exciting. It's very exciting. So are you seeing a shift in where people are looking? Are they still looking at the US? Or do you see them shifting over to other systems? So what are international students? What is the draw and what is direction are they looking now?
I think that, U.S. institutions of higher education are very prestigious and many families have heard of them. A lot of times a family comes to me and will say, well, we want our child to go to the United States. They don't understand that the education system in the United States is different from their home country. They just want their student to have the experience. A big part of every initial consultation is me explaining how US higher ed is different than Canadian, is different than what you would typically find in, say, Europe or Australia. What I've seen lately is obviously there's a lot of sticker shock. Families look at these costs of attendance, they almost have a heart attack. And so many families are looking for more economical options, along with prestige, right? So they're very interested in schools in the UK where they feel like they can definitely educate their child at a prestigious institution for less money. I work with a lot of students whose first language is Spanish. There's been I've always had students applying to Spain, but just the last 2 years I have them enrolling.
Oh, wow.
Right. That's new for sure. I've had students who've studied in France and Germany and Italy, the Netherlands, the UK, kind of all over. I think the other big trend that I'm seeing, Cyndy, is a family will now come to me and the safety almost always is they will stay in their home country and they are only going to pay in a foreign currency if they get into a really big name school. The families just, they can't justify the expense because there's been a lot of currency fluctuations.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. So what about political or other considerations? Is that impacting what families are looking at and considering?
It definitely was before. Certainly with the prior administration, I had students who, weren't comfortable with that. I think one of the topics that comes up more often than you might think are shootings. A lot of students are concerned about maybe a shooting on campus. And I had a student tell me the other day that he definitely wanted to study in Switzerland unless Putin made that impossible for him. So yes, so definitely politics can be a thing. And I think, I've had multiple students last year tell me that they were not going to study in certain states because of the way that state had voted in an election. They just don't feel comfortable or welcome.
So are they?
Which is a shame.
It is.
Because not everyone in a state, is going to be unwelcoming. So
right, exactly. Are they applying to multiple systems more? Like, do you find them applying to US, Canada?
Yeah, that's pretty typical for me. Almost all of the students I work with apply to multiple countries. And that's just always been, they're always applying in their home country, often as a backup, but sometimes I've had students get into some very prestigious institutions in the US and turn them down to stay home. So they'll apply in their home country. They'll apply in the States. They might apply in the UK. That's like a common combo, or home country, US, Canada. I I think the most I ever had was a student applying to 8 different countries. It was an, it was an art student. It was a lot. I mean, we had a really big spreadsheet.
I bet. Yeah, that makes it way more complicated. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So how is the application different for international students?
In terms of applying to the US or in terms of applying other places?
Well, let's start with the US.
Okay. I think it's such a good question. A lot of consultants, I'll hear them say, well, it's so much more work to work with an international student. And honestly, if it is, I don't know where. I don't, that has not been my experience at all. I mean, the process is identical. And then in addition to that, if a student's native language is not English, they will have to submit an English language proficiency test. So that might be a TOEFL, it might be an IELTS, it might be a Cambridge exam. And then something really unfortunate that happened with COVID, it's something that universities had gotten away from, and then it came back full force with COVID, is now many institutions want to see a student's financials at the time of application, right? They must show them to get the visa. But before, colleges would pretty much say, if you are accepted, then we need you to send this information to get your I-20. Now a student, you know, in a lot of places, they have to show that up front. And that's a pain. And it's really important to know. And I always send emails out to the students and parents about it. And I'm pretty sure a lot of them don't read my emails because they're always scrambling at the last minute trying to get their financials in. But other than that, it's really the same for a student applying in the US. And, you know, I think for students who are applying outside of the US, you know, what's really important to know, you know, most of my students come in from outside, so they understand that system. But, you know, it's really, you can get an excellent education, but the student really has to know what it is they want to study, right? They're applying directly into a major. They're usually 3-year courses. Sometimes they're 4. That's all they're studying. There's no gen eds or, you know, general curriculum, nothing like that. You know, if you want to study business, that's all you're doing, and you're doing it intensively for 3 years. And there's no hand-holding abroad. You know, student life it's not a really big concern, right? You're going to go abroad, you're going to get your apartment on your own. You know, if you want to go to class, you go to class. If you don't want to go to class, you don't. You know, you show up to take the final. It's very different. And students need to be very independent and really know what they want and kind of be ready to take that leap, because no one's going to push you.
Right. So do you recommend, especially like for your US students that might be looking abroad, sometimes that might be a little more of a challenge, I find, than the international students come to the US, because so often they have that independent, they've traveled the world, they know how to manage transportation, you know, they're used to doing things much more on their own than our American students. So do you recommend something to help those, especially US students or other unprepared students, to get ready, like a gap year or postgraduate year or something like that?
Yeah, I think gap years are great because a lot of European students are going to take them anyway. So if you're starting at 18, you're already going to be younger than a lot of the students at the university. So I love the idea of gap years. You know, I'm trying to remember right now what popped into my head when you asked me that question, because it floated off somewhere. But, you know, mostly I think it is about, you know, knowing what you want, knowing that you can do it, and also understanding the culture. That was what it popped into my head, because the culture is very different. And I can give you an example. You know, I had a student who once went to the UK, and they don't drink. And they said it's really hard. Like, everybody just wants to go to the pub and have a pint. That's the way students socialize there. That's the culture. And I just don't want to have a beer at the end of every day. Like, that's just not kind of, you know, who I am. And every culture is really different. So, I think it can sound like a great idea at the beginning, but it isn't always. And I always encourage a student, you need to apply in your home country as well, because you don't necessarily know exactly what you want.
Right.
It's better to, my mantra is, all we're going to try to do together is open as many doors as possible. You get to decide later which door you walk through.
That's exactly what I tell students. Exactly. I'm going to help you open all the doors, all the windows, and make as many possibilities. And then you get to decide which ones you're going to walk through. Yep. Yeah. So do they make decisions, on that same theme? Sometimes people, any student, like now, they're making decisions based on their basketball rankings or the football rankings or the U.S. News and World Report. So how much of an impact do you find, like U.S. News and World Report, especially with your international student?
Huge. I can tell them what hogwash those rankings are until I'm blue in the face. It doesn't really matter. What I do when a family is particularly obsessed with rankings is I just bombard them with rankings. I had a father once tell me his son could only go to a top 20 school. And this was someone who wanted to study business. And so I wrote back to the dad and I said, okay, great. Let me know which one of these. And I think I found 8 or 9 different rankings, all for business. And I just pasted them all in the email, kind of to show him gently how kind of absurd the rankings are. But yeah, definitely, they look at U.S. News and World Report. I also think anything like in a book, the CTCL schools, they have their own book. So that's something that I can sell. I'm really keen on accreditations. And I find that's a way that you can really open up a family's mind, right? When you explain to them, look, any university, any business program that's AACSB accredited is going to be an excellent education. So now that we know that, what do you want outside of that? And let's find schools that are AACSB accredited that kind of match that criteria. That's been really good at kind of putting some more, more admissible schools on lists, and families kind of opening up to that idea. So same, with engineering, the ABET accredited. That tends to work. And of course, for students going abroad, they might look at the QS World Rankings, but for the UK, the league tables really, it's all about the league tables. That's all it's about. Because of course, no one is saying, except I think for me, I'm a big fan of Bristol in the UK, but no one is saying, oh my gosh, like I really want to go to Bristol. No, they're saying if Bristol is the top in this, which is what I want to study, then I want to go there. They only look at academics.
So I'm not familiar with the league tables. Tell us more about that.
They're super important. They are super important. And I think there's something that I'm always trying to teach people about the league tables. I get contacted by lots of people who say, hey, can you just teach me about the UK? And it's funny. I was on a roundtable earlier today, and I'd love to give all of your students the same message that I gave the roundtable. It is not hard to do international consulting. It's in Europe, they couldn't make it easier. This is do not be afraid of it. It's really a snap. I wish the US were as straightforward. Don't get nervous. You've got this. You can do it. You can do it. I always remind people, I'm like, come on, kids are supposed to be able to do this on their own. Of course we can do this.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the league tables are different rankings that are usually associated with newspapers, right? So the Guardian has one, and you can look in Times Higher Ed, There's a few different league tables, and their methodologies are very clear and they're listed. But what I like about the UK, which is so great, is that every single year they survey the students, right? The majority, almost every university there is public, right? So the government is surveying, they have phenomenal completion rates. The completion rates are all in the high 90s across the board, right? They're not losing students the way we do in the States. And so they are looking at very specific metrics, class size, how much money they're investing per student. Was the student satisfied with the course? Was the student satisfied with their teaching? Did they get a job placement? If a student came in academically at this level, did they go up here or did they drop? They're looking at lots of different things, and they will rank by subject. So you could go into, I want to see the engineering league tables. I want to see the biology league tables. I want to see law league tables, philosophy. And so it's really important to look at those league tables, because they're really going to indicate to you where they're going to get the best academic experience. And that's what it's about over there. The universities want to bring in a chair. That's what they want. It is all about academics.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's exciting. I'll have to look into that, and I'll put that,
if you don't know about I find that for most people, the league tables is the missing piece that they didn't know about the league tables, right? So the minute I show it to them, they're like, oh, this is so great. Yeah.
It's like, why don't we have something like that in the US, right?
Exactly.
So is there something like that in Canada or in the other countries, Jen?
In Canada, there's
they're like,
what's it called?
McGraw or something.
McClure's, I wanted to say. Something like that. I'm going to be really honest. I just have my favorite universities in Canada, and I tend to those are the ones that I put on lists, right? I'm a big fan of Waterloo, big fan of Toronto, love UBC. I know several people who went to Mount Allison, which is a little liberal arts college. Kind of off by itself. They all had tremendous experiences. I actually just had a student go to visit it last week. Oh, nice. So I kind of have my favorites that I tend to push a little bit more.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
So what other advice words of wisdom would you give for counselors that are looking?
I think the one that I just gave for sure, don't be afraid of it. I do know one of the best things that I learned in my master's program actually was how to properly use Google search. Oh. And it's really, really helpful in this, because you really can search for and easily learn about each country's academic system, how it works, what a typical transcript looks like. All of these things exist online. WES, which is a credentialing agency, which there are very few undergraduate institutions that want a foreign high school transcript to go through credentialing. Occasionally there is. I know one of the publics in Alabama does. I just can't remember which one it is. Not one of the big ones. But if you go to WES, which is World Educational System Services, I think actually. Anyway, it's west.org, I'm pretty sure. They'll have they have explanations about things. There's tons of information on the internet. So don't panic if you get an inquiry. I think seek out help, look for somebody who knows about it, who can give you a crash course or teach you. We're both big on professional development. I feel like I belong to every association I can belong to. And all of those associations have fabulous resources. NACAC has a guide to international admissions, country by country, they break it down. So, Google should be your friend, and don't be afraid of this. It's not as hard as it seems.
It doesn't have to be as intimidating, right?
Yeah, no, it shouldn't be.
Well, Jennie, thank you very much.
You're welcome. This has been great.